Hi, welcome to Hearn Family Homestead. I'm Amanda. Today is going to be all about saving seeds for our garden for next year. So I'm going to gather up some containers and we'll get started. So I've gathered up a container to harvest the seeds into and some envelopes. I like to store them in envelopes rather than plastic. It helps the seeds to stay dry. I'm going to label them as I go so I know what's in there. And I also recommend that if you're going to save seeds, you get a good seed saving guide. This is the book that I use, and I really like the information that's in there. So before we get started on some of the smaller seeds, I wanted to talk about squash real quick. For squash, what you'll want to do if you're going to save the seed is cure them in a shady, warm location for about 7 to 10 days, and then you can store them until you're ready to eat them. Cut them open and take out the seeds, and then you'll wash the seeds and dry them on a rigid surface like a cookie sheet or a plate or something like that. And then you can store them in an envelope and they'll keep for about 6 years. There are 6 species of squash, and some of the more common ones are Maxima, Peppo, Moscata, and then Mixta. The Maxima are the sweetmeat, some of your larger pumpkins, Hubbards, things like that. This is Oregon sweetmeat that we have right here. And then the Peppo include your zucchini, acorn, and spaghetti, among others. There's several varieties within each species. And a common variety within the Moscata species would be butternut. And then there's the Mixta species, which a common variety would be your green and white cushaws. The different species of squash will not typically cross from one to the other, but within the species, the varieties will readily cross. So you want to be careful not to plant 2 varieties within the same species too close together. One example of that would be if you're going to grow zucchini and acorn, you want to keep those at the far ends of your garden and maybe hand pollinate in order to save seed from these. And what I like to do when I used to have more room in my garden, I would grow the Oregon sweetmeat and then I would choose either the acorn or the spaghetti squash, and I would plant one of those, and then I would also plant a butternut, and I could save seeds from any of these with no problem, as long as I made sure to keep my zucchinis farther away from the other acorn or the spaghetti. So I've got my kids here. They're going to help me save some of these seeds. This is Reese and JC, and they're going to help me take the seeds off of the stems, and then we'll get them in envelopes. So these are our pea vines that we pulled this spring, and we've been hanging them from our front porch rafters to dry. And we did the same with the carrots. Then there's our radishes and chard, and then some matcha greens. So what we're going to do first is collect all the pods off of the vines, and then we'll take the peas out of the pods. We have our pods, and some of these won't be viable. If they're too shriveled, then they may not grow the next year. But then we also have some that are nice and plump, and I expect that those will grow just fine. So we're going to take all the peas out of the pods now. Peas are self-pollinating. They do not readily cross-pollinate, and the peas seeds will stay good for about 3 years if you keep them in a cool, dark location. Alright, we're going to move on to the carrots. Carrots can cross with wild varieties of carrots and also Queen Anne's lace. So you want to isolate them by bagging. We're taking a little bit of a risk because we didn't do that, but our garden is in town and it's fairly isolated. We're going to go ahead and start cutting the heads off, and then we'll separate the seeds off of the heads. And carrot seeds, their germination standard is only about 55%, so we're going to plant them thick and save them as often as we can. And carrots are biennial, so that means that they only flower every 2 years. So after the first year, you leave some in the ground and they will flower the next year. You let those flowers dry, and then you can save the seeds. These carrot seeds should come off fairly easily. They're already falling off, so we're just going to kind of rub them between our fingers and let them drop into the pan. And we actually had to get a bigger envelope because we ended up with so many carrot seeds. So we're going to put them in this manila envelope. Good job, guys. Next we have our radishes that we let go to seed. Radishes are wind pollinated and will cross with wild and domestic, so it may be kind of a surprise what we end up with, but we'll just try it and see what we end up with next year. So to get these radish seeds out, they're kind of small, so we just crack open the pod. And then there's the little seeds inside. And these radish pods, when they have flowered and then put on the pods will still be green, and you can actually eat those and they taste like radishes. This is our chard that we've been saving. Chard is in the same family as beets, and the seed will stay good up to 6 years if you keep it, again, in a cool, dark location. And chard is also wind pollinated, and it needs to be 2 to 5 miles away from other plants in the beet family. Are they coming off easy?
Yeah.
Good. And each seed from the chard family is actually a compound of seeds and will grow more than one plant. I wasn't able to find any hard data on saving matcha seed, but the kids are going to treat it just like the radishes and pull the pods off and then harvest the smaller seeds out of the pods. So now what we're going to do is we're just going to let the wind blow as much of that chaff away as it will. And then we'll do this a few times so that we don't have as much chaff in with our seed. So the last thing that we're going to save seed from, other than tomatoes later on, is this lettuce that we have bagged. And we've bagged it so that they don't cross because we have a couple different varieties here. So we're just going to pull out the fluff, and the seeds will be on the end of that fluff. And then we will label the envelopes with the variety. So I have some other vegetables that I brought into the house that I'm saving the seeds from. We've got tomatoes, peppers, dill, and then some zinnias that I'm saving the seeds from. So I'll show you each of these real quick. Dill is a super easy one to harvest. You just let it go to seed right on the plant, and then the seeds come off really easily. It doesn't cross very easy except with other dill varieties, and the seeds are good for about 5 years. Zinnias are another easy one. You pick them after the flowers have started to die back, and then the seeds will be at the ends of the petals. Just like that. But you want to let these fully dry before you take the seeds off, and it makes it a lot easier. For peppers, what you want to do is let them fully ripen. On the vine is preferable. But if you let them ripen off the vine in the house, the seeds will still be viable as long as they're fully ripe. And then you just take the seeds off. And I like to dry them on a paper plate like this one. I've got several varieties here that I've already saved. And you'll want to be careful with hot peppers. This one is a Anaheim, so it's not super spicy. But if you're doing jalapenos or anything like that, you want to wear gloves so that you don't get the oils on your skin and in your eyes. Insects can cross-pollinate peppers with other varieties of peppers, and the seed should remain about 50% viable for 3 years. And for tomatoes, what you want to do is cut open the tomato. And I'm going to go ahead and cut this in quarters just to access the most seeds. and then you'll squeeze the seeds out into a container. It doesn't matter what kind. And you'll want to get all the pulp and the seeds with it. And then I'm going to add some filtered water to that. And then I'll just let it set until it gets kind of moldy on the top. And then I'll pour off the mold and strain it and then wash it with some clear water. And the good seeds should fall to the bottom, and any seeds that aren't viable should float. Tomatoes don't cross very easily, and the seed should stay good for at least 4 years, up to 10 years if it's stored properly. When it comes to the sunflowers, I don't think we'll have to save many seeds from those. We'll have lots of volunteers from what the birds are knocking onto the ground. Thanks for joining us today, guys. Be sure and subscribe if you want to see more videos like this one, and we will catch you on the next video.
Bye. Bye.